Disclaimer: all the footage you will see in this video was captured with an active visual aid for colorblind people. So if some of it might look weird to you, this is the reason why. Additionally, I will only show scenes of the very first episode to avoid as many spoilers as I possibly can. With both of that out of the way, let's begin. After the success of the first seasons of Life is Strange, as well as the various variations and side stories, it was only a matter of time until an official new season was announced. Developed by Deck 9, who were also working on the mini-season Before the Storm, True Colors tries to fill in our void for much-needed social drama in a teenage coming-of-age setting. But does it actually succeed in showing us its true colors, or does it fall flat like most of my jokes? Time to find out. The game's out on Steam, Stadia, GeForce Now, PlayStation and Xbox, with Game Pass and Nintendo Switch coming on later this year. So without further ado, here's my review for Life is Strange: True Colors. Personally, I really loved the first season of Life is Strange. Experiencing Max and Chloe's story was not only very engaging, but also charming and interesting. It got me really soaked into this world and all of its characters, albeit the gameplay was a bit lacking, which in the end is pretty much to be expected for this type of game in this specific genre. Unfortunately, Season 2 made tons of mistakes, both character-wise and with its story. Neither could I relate to the two brothers, nor was their road trip through the US even remotely interesting or engaging, hence I stopped playing after like 3 episodes. After sad disappointment, my hopes for True Colors were not particularly high, and I've expected another letdown, but the result is actually both good and bad. We play as Alex, a young woman who just got out of a youth center where she spent the last 8 years due to several issues from her past, which we will also discover throughout the runtime of the game. After reuniting with her brother, she gets introduced to the various residents of Haven Springs, a small and cozy town in Colorado's Rockies. The weather is lovely, the sun is shining, and everything seems calm and quiet, but of course that's just the beginning. During the course of the following 8 hours, Alex will be engaged in various conversations, from friendships, make enemies, and of course discover the town's deepest secret, buried way down below under the vast mountains. Haven Springs very quickly feels like home, just like Arcadia Bay did back in the very first season with Max and Chloe. There's a few shops, a small park next to a picturesque lake, and the obligatory bar, all to explore under your feet. Of course, the mostly linear story takes you to its various places, but once and so often you're also allowed to stray from the path and try to discover some details on your own, but none are really relevant for the overall arc of the adventure. In the end, only a handful of characters drive the story, and despite that, the developers did not manage to fill all the dialogues with interesting and relevant information. Many scenes only serve as fillers, aren't adding anything, and may even feel tedious and boring. And this is exactly the game's biggest problem. It barely ever feels exciting. The very first episode is clearly the strongest of the 5, with its introduction of the town and the various characters. It's also the episode where the most important aspect of the story will unfold, and everything that follows afterwards only builds up on said premise and falls short very quickly. Some characters play a very big role at first and then suddenly disappear, whereas others will literally surprise you with their actions, but not in a good way. For a game that's so relying on its story and personas, this should have been much stronger. But not only are the most of the individuals flat and uninteresting, the story also won't manage to pull you in as much as it needed to, and some scenes even are confusing without any substance, just being added to try and put some more weight onto everything, but it won't make any sense at all. It almost feels like the writers did have a plan and knew where the story should end up, but they didn't really know how to actually get there. In the end, This just leads to you as a player not really give a damn about anything. Just like today's sponsor! This video is brought to you by no one, because no one actually gives a damn. If you also like to give a damn, make sure to subscribe to No One today and get 0% off of nothing at all. Clearly the best aspect of the game is our main character Alex. Deck 9 once more managed to create a likable, interesting young woman with a rough past and an uncertain future. She's also sympathetic and shows big empathy towards her surroundings, which is also shown in her special ability. Whereas Max could turn back time and Daniel from Season 2 was a whiny little Super Jedi bitch that should have been killed by Anakin in Episode 3, Alex is much more down to earth and can see and feel people's emotions while also reading their minds to a certain degree. Gameplay-wise, this is sometimes optional, but mostly necessary to progress in dialogues and reach the next steps in the story chapters. And yet, hardly ever you can reveal relevant or interesting insights into people's thoughts, as once more, most of it is shallow and barely scratches the surface of a particular being. But of course, you cannot expect deep mechanics in a game like this. As briefly mentioned already, you can explore Haven Springs and its alleys while talking to its residents, but that's about it. The main path throughout the story is already shaped before you, and while you will still be making some heavy decisions now and then, they only alter minor details and to a certain point the fate of some characters as well. So nothing out of the ordinary for fans of the series or similar games. From a technical standpoint, True Colors is a mixed bag. It's obvious, even at first glance, that there's been a huge graphical leap compared with previous titles of the series. Especially facial animations are extraordinary and allow you to even see the tiniest nuances of emotions, whether it's happiness, discomfort, or even shame. The only game that comes close to this was Rockstar's L.A. Noire, and even AAA titles struggle to show this level of detail in characters' facial expressions. While this is the updated engine's biggest strength, don't expect the same from textures or effects. Lighting can be pretty in certain areas and scenes, and they even add another layer of depth to the overall visuals. Apart from faces, the animations can be pretty stiff sometimes, but not to a degree where it would be horribly distressing. In the end, this is a slow-paced, dialogue-focused game, and the production value doesn't have to be on par with other titles that had a 10 times bigger budget. Unfortunately, there have been some smaller technical issues during my playthrough. For one, I was not able to properly use the mouse in the game's menu. I could neither select nor click anything, so I've played the whole game using my controller. If this is the same in-game itself, I cannot answer. In Episode 4, there was a moment where a part of the scenery behind a minor NPC was just a big black square. It completely disappeared again when I finished interacting with that person, but still it was a little off-putting. During the same chapter, the game let my GPU driver crash, which resulted to me seeing the desktop, and I had to restart from a checkpoint, while my game capture was corrupted as well. Some people even reported the game-breaking bug in Chapter 5 that led them to actually having to restart the whole game in order to finish it. Of course, you can never take every single possible hardware configuration into account, but bugs like that would require immediate fixing before launching your final product. At least sound-wise, everything's fine. Voice acting is decent, considering that actual people had to deal with a sometimes cringy script with very weird interactions between characters. One of the game's biggest strengths is once more its stellar soundtrack from rather unknown small artists. The calm tracks range from uplifting and happy to sad and very emotional and take you on a journey, perfectly blending in with the scenery and the overall tone of the game. Unfortunately, people who stream or monetize their videos will not be able to appreciate the soundtrack due to licensing issues. And the developers try to tackle this with a streamer-friendly setting within the main menu, which shuts off every licensed piece of music in the game. A neat thought, but sadly enough, This leads to some scenes just being dead silent, which sets a very different mood altogether and actually destroys the experience as a whole. In the end, Life is Strange True Colors is for the most part what I expected from the series, but it just cannot quite live up. Is it better than the second season? Yes, it is. It definitely is. And yet it still fails on too many levels. The overall story is not interesting or engaging enough, while many characters aren't properly fleshed out and everything just feels way too shallow. And that's a real shame, because Alex is the best protagonist since first season's Max Caulfield, and in certain moments I could really feel her emotions and immediately wanted to jump through my screen to help her out and comfort her. But then just 5 minutes later you see things happening that just leave you speechless, and not in a good way. The twists and turns in this installment just don't flow naturally. Some characters' motivations leave you pretty dazzled, and it doesn't help that some just disappear in the middle of the story arc. I really wanted to love and recommend this, but given the circumstances, I just can't. And charging €60 for this is just plain insulting. I can see why some people might love it, especially if they had fun with the previous titles, but I would heavily advise you to wait until this falls under €40 or lower. Give it some time to patch out some of the bugs, and once it's on sale, you might end up with 8 hours of entertainment for yourself. At least this time you can finish the game in your own pace, and you won't have to wait for the next episode to drop, so that's something. If you've made it this far, thanks a lot for watching. It really means a lot to me. Leave your comments down below what you think of the game. Have you played it? Did you like it? Are you planning to? I'd be delighted to hear from you. Until then, have a great day. I'm out.